Newer is always better, some will say, but I think I'll have to beg to differ. When it comes to Total War graphics, it's no secret that most people, and myself included, would in a heartbeat declare that Warhammer 3 does indeed look better than Medieval 1. But in a series which after all has a 20-year history, and sports a massive range in visual style and fidelity, the latest doesn't necessarily mean best. So which game do I think look best? Or the most charming, or indeed, the ugliest? Well, I can't wait to find out myself, honestly. And by the way, while I have you here, only 9% of people watching this video are subscribed to the channel. If you enjoy my content, guys, it would mean so much to me if you made a simple click and sub to the channel. It really goes a long way in helping my content reach further, and hopefully help you in knowing when there's new content to be enjoyed. I'd really appreciate it. In the early days, Total War depicted its wars in 2D, and for that reason, I won't really analyze them more than that. I think both Shogun and Medieval 1 are ugly and unwieldy for today's standards, and since they are in a league of their own, compared to the 3D titles, they're not really comparable either way. Our first batch of true 3D Total War games are Rome and Medieval 2, mainline games that came out just 2 years apart. Rome Total War is the oldest. It looked revolutionary back in 2004, and honestly still looks good today, and it's all owed to a certain timeless charm. You see, back in the day, Total War's visual design language was colorful, simple yet sharp, and importantly, easy on the eyes. The entire image in Rome has a feeling of being uniform, of being pleasing to look at. And even though it might be a product of its time that things look a bit more cartoony than hyper-realistic, I think it's exactly what makes it so timeless. The two things that have not stood the test of time in Rome is the UI, which admittedly does look low-res and chunky, and most important of all, the unit animations. While the animations aren't necessarily a part of the visual image, it still is a part of the visual experience, and it's the prime reason why Rome feels outdated. Jump to Medieval 2 though, and we can definitely see that these two games are cut from the same cloth. Medieval 2 sports the exact same design language, offering a colorful world, yet one that remains sharp. And let's talk about these two words, colorful and sharp, because I think they are the two single most important concepts in terms of Total War visuals. What I absolutely love about Rome and Medieval 2's visual fidelity is their consistency. No matter where on the map you look, the colors of the terrain might change, sure, but there are no strange color range changes messing up the contrast. The same color design remains on the battlefield, and it's easy to make out units from the trees and the buildings. Nothing looks too bright, and nothing looks too dark, and I've never once felt like anything in these games was directly ugly. The second aspect is sharpness. Rome and Medieval 2 looked amazing way back when, and they still look fantastic now honestly, and they owe much of this image clarity to sharpness and anti-aliasing. With the right in-game settings, nothing in these games look jagged or shimmery, shadows don't just pop out of nowhere, and objects like spears or trees look as sharp and clean as ever. Combined, these are the things that make these two games in particular look so timeless and so special, and why I believe they somehow managed to look uniquely beautiful among the Total War games even now. Now, even though Rome Remastered came out almost 2 decades later, I feel like it's appropriate to mention it here. Rome Remastered is obviously based on the Rome engine with added upgrades, meaning the skeleton remains the same quite literally, but the meat is different. And because of this, with the original Rome's foundation with tasteful updates, Rome Remastered, despite being founded on the older title, is ironically one of the best looking Total War games out there. And the proof is not necessarily in the base game either, but rather what this visual style and design allows for. Just see how detailed this game can look in a mod like RTR Imperium Surrectum, which appears absolutely stunning on the campaign map, and arguably even more beautiful in the detail of its soldiers on the battlefield. Now, detail is of course important. Rome Remastered units are beautifully detailed as models, but if we're talking Medieval 2, the beauty is not only in the visual detail, especially based on the time, but also on the details of game design. The fact that units with better armor visually changes that same unit is astonishing and fantastic. And even though, again, it's not a core visual image change, it certainly is a design improvement, one worthy of mentioning. The post-Medieval 2 era of Total War visuals is extremely interesting actually, and I think we can categorize them into 3 separate stages, giving us 5 stages in Total War in total. This third stage begins in 2009 and actually only lasts until 2010, which is a massive shame. This includes only Empire and Napoleon, the only purely gunpowder-focused games we have. Empire Total War, in terms of 3D upgrades, is in my opinion the biggest leap in visual fidelity Total War has ever seen. The sheer thickness of this campaign map's oceans, the succulent colors of the landmasses, the wind blowing in the faction flags, the slick looking coastlines and the detailed army and navy models, it all looks so damn good, and the map has been given a depth that stands heads and shoulders above anything before it. On the battlefield, unit models popped and came alive, and the naval battles showed ships that look beautiful and modern even by today's standards. Admittedly, Empire can look a bit rough around the edges. For one, the lighting on the battlefields can become extremely shiny and bright, and we still see some jagged edges even on the highest AA settings. It was also always weird to me how the depth of field effect kinda began arbitrarily at the upper edge of the screen no matter what. So we would get flags that always kinda look cut in half if you zoom all the way down. And since I love depth of field, it's kind of an issue for me. Even though Empire was an improvement in many ways, it did admittedly look a bit raw compared to Medieval 2 and Rome. It looked more ambitious but also a bit less polished. It's hard to fully explain it really, and I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that number 1, we're lacking proper post-processing effects to soften and dynamize the image, and 2, that the battle maps of Empire are just kind of boring when it comes to the lack of models and the goings-on, whether we're talking sieging a fort or a supposed city. Whatever shortcomings Empire had, Napoleon actually fixed. The foundation is clearly the same, but somehow, through the power of post-processing, Napoleon's campaign map just looks so damn clean. So tasty, so comfortable and pleasant to look at. The only, and I mean the only bad thing about this, and I think this is a bug and not a feature, is that shadows behave in a weird way. They flicker or move as you move, and it can really do a lot to ruin the image if you notice it. But on the battlefield especially does Napoleon excel perhaps above all others. If Empire looked amazing, Napoleon looks beyond. The image is somehow sharper and softer at the same time, giving exactly what I wanted from Empire. Here we have improved haze and better depth of field effects, and it makes every scene come alive like never before. I'm being absolutely serious when I say that Napoleon is the most comfortable Total War to look at, even 13 years later. Again, it's sharp, it's clean, and the color scheme is fantastic, natural yet easy on the eyes, and when you add on the excellent performance of this game, I think Napoleon might just be the peak of Total War graphics honestly. Now we enter the 4th era of Total War graphics, and this is arguably both the worst and the longest of them all, but that doesn't mean it's all bad. This era begins in 2011 with Shogun II and ends all the way up in 2018 with Thrones of Britannia. Now let me explain. Shogun II is a beautiful game in many ways. The map's visual style is gorgeous for example, and nothing here is necessarily ugly, but what we have here is suddenly a departure from Napoleon's polish. Shogun II's units appear less present than the ones in the last stage, gunfire and smoke effects are worsened, the battlefields are arguably less distinct except for, again, aesthetics, and the colors, even though they're done quite well, appear more muted than in Napoleon, attempting perhaps for more realism but stumbles in the process. The worst part though is Shogun II's anti-aliasing, and these two last parts, color and effective sharpness of the image, is exactly what's going to play Total War for the next 7 long years. With Rome 2, Total War oversaw a leap in raw visual fidelity, but again, something is wrong with the visual design direction, especially the color schemes and attention to a clear image. The campaign appears bigger and arguably more detailed than ever, but something is wrong with the colors and the sharpness here. But nowhere else is a problem as big as it is on the battlefield. I feel like it's almost a gamble whether I get a battle map with an extremely messed up color scheme or not, and depending on the time of day or whatever, both the maps themselves and the units vary immensely in how they look. I'd actually go so far as saying that even though Rome 2's unit models themselves are good looking, the overall image itself does them no service, as it washes them out or even makes them hard to look at by virtue of the changing lighting and dynamic range when zooming in or out. The exact same thing goes for Attila by the way. Now even though Attila is a bit more detailed and offers beautiful screen space reflections, Attila's visuals suffer from that same weird neurotic relationship with lighting and anti-aliasing, making battle maps either beautiful or downright ugly purely based on luck. And then we haven't mentioned this game's toxic relationship with shadows, which especially on the campaign map are just completely bogged down and flicker like no other. I don't even have to mention the performance, but I will anyway, since it's so gosh darn poorly optimized. Even though the performance is somewhat better in the games that followed, meaning Warhammer 1, Warhammer 2, and Thrones of Britannia, it all looks exactly the same really. The colors are just ugly, the sharpness is just not there, and these 5 games, despite being technically superior than the prior ones in terms of just raw models, actually end up looking so much worse because the overall visual design is worse on its own. It's just bad. And it feels so much worse to boot because the performance is just not there really. This is arguably the worst era of Total War games too, even though Attila ironically must stand out as the best game in the series. Luckily, most things change in our 5th and latest era, encompassing 3 Kingdoms, Troy, and Warhammer 3. Even though their design language differs, For example, in that Three Kingdoms campaign looks aesthetically beautiful, but is a nightmare in terms of gameplay, and that Troy is a beauty bar none. All of these last games look both detailed, soft, and clear at the same time. Bad anti-aliasing is finally a thing of the past, and miraculously, Total War has finally figured out to do both performance and color right again. Three Kingdoms excels from making great use of Chinese themes in a beautiful way, Troy is just a visual marvel from start to finish, and Warhammer 3, looking like a big leap compared to Warhammer 2, has finally caught up with the times. And to add to the pleasure, all of these games run so much better than the previous era of games, meaning we have better visual fidelity and better performance. I really think Total War has managed to make a return to the colorful yet sharp era of Medieval 2, but add those higher level of graphics beginning with Napoleon, and I believe all of this bodes really well for the future. As I mentioned, Three Kingdoms is the game standing out there, because for some reason, I find that both the army models and the city models are extremely hard to point out and differentiate from the map in a normal way. They both looked baked in a way that is not pleasing at all, and I much prefer the standard set by literally every other game in the series. When it all comes down to it, if I was forced to rank Total War games in terms of visual pleasantness, I really think I'd have to put a Total War Saga Troy on top for its sheer beauty and dedication to style and aesthetics, followed by Napoleon for its extremely pleasant image, and in third place, followed by Rome Remastered for bringing that old sharpness and color scheme, coupled with updated models that honestly have the ability to rival much newer games. And that's it from my opinion on the graphics of Total War. Do you think I have a point? Or am I totally crazy? And what might the next Total War look like? Let me know in the comments, and if you enjoyed the video, remember to leave a like and sub to the channel. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Cheers!